It's strange how everything can feel completely fine one minute and then crumble into chaos the next. I never expected our anniversary would turn into something that would haunt me for the rest of my life. But then again, when you're married, there are these little moments, these small shifts in behavior that you ignore because you don't want to admit that something's wrong. You convince yourself it's just a phase or that things will get better. It was a Tuesday, and we had planned everything. Dinner at the restaurant, a gift, a surprise. It was supposed to be special. My mind was already racing with excitement as I paced around the living room, waiting for Lena. But as the minutes ticked by, that excitement slowly began to turn into confusion. Where was she? Why wasn't she ready? She always took her time to get dressed, but this felt different. I had been sitting there for 20 minutes already when I sent her a text. Are you almost ready? She replied a minute later. Yeah, just finishing up. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe she had just gotten caught up in something. But then, as I glanced at the clock again, I realized she hadn't responded to me in a while. The silence felt louder than it should have. I stood up, walking toward the bedroom to check in on her. But just as I reached the doorway, I heard it, the faint sound of laughter coming from the other room. My stomach twisted. Was she on the phone with someone? She never laughed like that when we were alone. I knocked lightly on the door, trying to push down the rising panic in my chest. Lena? Everything okay? She quickly stopped laughing, and I heard her voice, a little too calm. Yeah, just a second. Her tone was distant, almost dismissive, but I tried to brush it off. Maybe I was overthinking things. I waited in the hallway, tapping my foot impatiently, until she finally emerged from the room. She was dressed, beautiful, as always, but there was something about her expression that caught me off guard. It wasn't the joyful look I had imagined when we first started planning the night. There was a cloud hanging over her, and she seemed distracted. Hey, I said, trying to sound upbeat, though my voice cracked slightly. You look amazing. Ready to go? She looked at me, giving me a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Thanks. Yeah, let's go. I tried to keep up the mood, making small talk in the car as we drove to the restaurant. But the silence between us grew heavier. It wasn't the comfortable silence we used to share. It was uncomfortable, charged with something I couldn't quite put my finger on. At dinner, I tried everything. I asked her about her day, about her thoughts on the future, about everything that usually got her excited. But her responses were short, her eyes glazing over as she fiddled with the silverware or checked her phone. She wasn't fully present. And then, as the main course was served, she did something that made my heart stop. Lena took a deep breath and looked at me for a long moment, like she was searching for something. I don't know if I can do this anymore, she said quietly. I froze. The fork I was holding almost slipped from my hand as I tried to process her words. What do you mean? She hesitated, looking away. I don't know. I just feel like I'm not the same person I was when we first got together. Things have changed, and I can't keep pretending that everything's okay when it's not. My mind raced. Was she talking about our relationship? Was she unhappy? What did she mean by things have changed? I had never seen her like this before, not once in all the years we'd been together. I felt the sting of confusion and hurt bubble up inside me. Are you saying you don't want to be with me anymore? My voice was barely a whisper, but it felt like it was echoing around the room. She looked down at the table, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. I don't know. I just need space. I need to figure things out. Space. Those words hung in the air, suffocating me. In that moment, I couldn't breathe. The one thing I had feared the most, the one thing I had always tried to avoid, was happening right in front of me. I couldn't process it. I couldn't understand how we had gone from planning this night to her telling me she needed space. But there it was. She wasn't even looking at me anymore. Her attention was somewhere else, somewhere far away. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. You can't just say that, Lena. You can't just drop a bomb like that and expect me to stay calm. We're supposed to be celebrating, for God's sake. Our anniversary. This was supposed to be the one night we could relax and forget about everything else. She shook her head, her lips tight. I know. I didn't want it to be like this. I didn't want to hurt you. But you've been so caught up in everything, and I've been trying to figure out what's going on with me. And now, I don't know if I even know what I want anymore. The words cut deeper than anything she had ever said to me. It felt like everything I had worked for, everything I thought we had built together, was slipping through my fingers like sand. I sat back in my chair, numb. The restaurant noise faded into the background, and all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. In the quiet, I tried to make sense of what she was telling me. Was this her way of saying she wanted a divorce? Or was it something less permanent, something that could be worked through? I wasn't sure, and that uncertainty was tearing me apart. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur, with neither of us really saying anything. She didn't seem upset, but she didn't seem like she cared either. And as we left the restaurant, there was no more of the light-hearted conversation we had planned for the night. Only the echo of her words. The drive home was quiet, unbearably quiet. We didn't say a word. Lena stared out the window, her fingers lightly tapping on her phone, and I couldn't bring myself to speak either. The night had already been ruined, but it felt like it was just getting worse. I could feel the tension thickening in the air between us, something unspoken but all too real. The excitement I had felt earlier in the evening had vanished, replaced by a gnawing sense of dread in my stomach. We pulled into the driveway of our house. The lights in the living room were still on, casting soft shadows across the walls. I didn't know what to say, but I knew I couldn't let the night end like this. I couldn't just ignore the weight of what she had said, as if everything was normal. But Lena didn't seem interested in talking. When I turned off the engine, she made no move to leave the car. "I think I need some time alone," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Time alone. I blinked, trying to process it. It felt like she had just thrown up a wall between us, and I was standing on the outside, looking in. Alone? I echoed. "Lena, you can't just drop a bombshell like that, and then act like everything's fine. I need to understand what's going on. I thought tonight was supposed to be about us, about celebrating." Her eyes flicked to me briefly before she sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I know, but I just need to think. I don't know what I want, and I can't keep pretending everything is okay when it's not." I wanted to argue, to tell her how unfair this was, but something in the way she spoke, so distant, so resigned, stopped me. She wasn't angry, and she wasn't even upset. She was tired of pretending, and that thought hit me harder than I expected. I sat in silence for a moment, weighing my options. I could push her, demand that she explain herself, but I could already tell she wasn't in a place to have that conversation. Not tonight. With a heavy sigh, I opened the door and stepped out, feeling the cold night air hit my face. It felt like a slap of reality. Lena followed me, but she didn't come close. She stayed near the car, arms crossed, looking like she had already made up her mind about everything. And for the first time, I wondered if this was something bigger than I had imagined. Was she already checked out of our marriage, or was she just too lost to find her way back? I watched her for a moment, the distance between us growing with each second. "Do you even want to try to fix this?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. Her response was so quiet, I barely heard it. "I don't know." The uncertainty in her voice sent a chill down my spine. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, and she was slipping further and further away, each word she spoke pushing her out of my grasp. I had never felt so helpless. I couldn't sleep that night. How could I? My mind was racing, replaying the conversation over and over, trying to make sense of what Lena had said. "I don't know if I can do this anymore." Those words kept echoing in my head. I had been married to Lena for 3 years, and in all that time, I never once thought something like this would happen. Sure, we had our issues, small disagreements, misunderstandings, but nothing that ever felt like it could pull us apart. Yet here I was, questioning everything. Was she really ready to walk away? The night dragged on, and I found myself staring at the ceiling, watching the shadows play on the walls. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was just going through a phase, or maybe work had gotten to her. But something in my gut told me it was more than that. Something had shifted between us, and I couldn't figure out what it was or why. By morning, I still hadn't heard from her. I knew she was up. I could hear her moving around in the kitchen, but she didn't come to me, didn't speak to me. I tried calling her once, but she didn't pick up. I was starting to feel like I was losing her, like she had already checked out without me even realizing it. After some time, I finally got out of bed and went downstairs. I found her sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in front of her. She wasn't looking at me. Her gaze was fixed on the window, distant, as though the world outside held more interest than anything inside. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say, but I couldn't take the silence anymore. "Lena, we need to talk about last night." She didn't respond right away. Instead, She slowly lifted her coffee cup to her lips, taking a long sip, as though stalling. I could feel the tension between us, thick enough to choke on. I don't want to keep pretending like everything is fine, she finally said, her voice so quiet I almost missed it. She still wasn't looking at me, and it hurt more than I could express. What do you mean, pretending? I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. You said you needed space. You said you didn't know what you wanted. What does that even mean? She set the coffee cup down, her fingers lingering on the rim. It means, I'm not sure if I know who I am anymore. And I'm not sure I know who we are, either. I couldn't breathe. My mind couldn't process what she was saying. What are you talking about? You're the same person you've always been. We are the same. We've been through everything together. Why is this happening now? Lena finally looked at me, and when she did, there was a sadness in her eyes that broke something deep inside of me. I don't know if I'm happy anymore, Ethan, she whispered. The words landed like a punch. I had seen her sad. I had seen her stressed, but I had never seen her like this. This wasn't a casual complaint or a passing moment of frustration. This was real. She was telling me she wasn't sure she wanted to be with me anymore. And it crushed me. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. I wanted to tell her she was overreacting, that we could fix this, but I could tell she wasn't going to hear me. Whatever she was feeling, she was already too far gone. I think I need some time to figure things out, Lena said, her voice trembling slightly. I don't know if I can keep living in this uncertainty. The air in the room felt suffocating, and I felt like I was losing control. Lena, I don't understand. You're talking about us like we're already over. My voice cracked, and I hated how weak it sounded. I'm not saying we're over, but I can't keep living like this, she replied softly, almost too softly. I need space to figure things out. Her words hung in the air, a heavy, bitter cloud that seemed to swallow all the air around me. Space. I repeated, almost as if testing the word. You keep saying that, but what does it really mean? It means I need time. Away from everything, she said, her gaze flicking away from mine. From you, from us. I just need to think. I stood there, frozen. I had no idea what to say. Every part of me screamed at me to fix this, to tell her everything would be fine, that we could work through it. But deep down, I knew that nothing would be the same after today. Are you asking for a break? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The question felt so small, so insignificant compared to the weight of what was happening. Lena nodded, but it wasn't the reassurance I was hoping for. She didn't seem certain about anything anymore, and that scared me more than anything. For the rest of the day, we barely spoke. She kept to herself, retreating into the guest room while I stayed in the living room, trying to process what had just happened. I kept asking myself over and over if I had done something wrong, if I could have done anything differently. But there was no clear answer, only silence. And in that silence, I realized the worst part of all. I wasn't sure I could stop her from leaving. By the time evening rolled around, I could feel the weight of the day pressing down on me. I had spent hours trying to figure out what had happened, retracing every conversation, every gesture, trying to pinpoint the moment things went wrong. But I kept coming back to one thought. Lena had changed. Something inside her had shifted, and I didn't know how to reach her anymore. Around 8 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from Lena. Can we talk? I stared at the screen for a long moment. Her words felt like a lifeline thrown into the storm, but at the same time, they filled me with dread. What was she going to say now? Was she going to tell me it was over? I hesitated. Part of me wanted to ignore the text, pretend like nothing was wrong, but I couldn't. I had to know what was going on, even if it tore me apart. I typed back, "Where are you?" "Out back," she replied almost instantly. I walked to the back door, my mind racing, my heart pounding. When I stepped outside, I saw Lena sitting on the porch swing, staring out into the dark backyard. The light from the kitchen window cast a faint glow on her face, but her expression was hard to read. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to approach her. Everything felt so fragile between us now, like any wrong move could shatter what was left. But I couldn't stay silent. "Lena, what's going on?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. She didn't look at me immediately. Her hands rested on her lap, fingers intertwined. "I don't know how to explain it," she said, her voice soft, almost like she was speaking to herself. "I've been feeling so lost lately, like I'm stuck in this fog. And I don't know if I can keep pretending that everything's okay when it's not. I sat down beside her, but the distance between us felt miles wide. What are you trying to say? I asked, barely able to keep the desperation out of my voice. She sighed, leaning back against the swing. I just don't feel like I'm myself anymore. And I don't know how to fix it, or if I even want to try. My heart sank. The words felt like a blow to the chest. Are you saying you don't want to be with me anymore? Lena finally turned to face me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I don't know, she whispered. I just feel like everything's slipping away, and I don't know how to stop it. I reached for her hand, but she pulled back slightly, like she couldn't let me in anymore. It was the hardest thing I'd ever felt. The woman I had loved, the woman I thought I knew, was slipping through my fingers, and I couldn't stop it. You can't just give up on us, Lena, I said, my voice cracking. We've been through so much together. Please don't throw that away. I'm not throwing it away, she said quickly, almost defensively. I just need to figure things out. I need space. The word space seemed to hang in the air, lingering between us like a poison. I didn't know what it meant anymore. Did space mean she needed time to think, or did it mean something darker, something final? Please, just tell me what you want, I begged. She didn't answer right away, and the silence between us felt suffocating. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely audible. I don't know what I want, Ethan, but I need to figure it out on my own. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't the person she needed anymore. I wasn't the one who could make her happy. It was like she had already decided to walk away, and no amount of pleading from me could change her mind. The thought crushed me, but there was nothing I could do. I had to let her go. The following days felt like a blur. Lena and I barely spoke. She stayed in the guest room, and I remained in the living room, each of us existing in the same house, but not truly together. The silence was suffocating, and I found myself staring at the empty space where she used to be, her laughter, her warmth, the simple things that once made our home feel alive. I spent hours in the kitchen, trying to occupy my mind, but nothing felt right. The coffee felt tasteless, the air in the house too thick, and no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, I could feel her absence in every corner. The house was too quiet. I tried texting her a few times, but my messages were met with short, distant responses. I'm fine, not now, I'm thinking. And that was it. I could tell she was pulling further away, and the longer I waited, the more she seemed like a stranger to me. One night, I sat down on the couch, scrolling through my phone, hoping for some distraction. But all I could think about was her. What had happened to us? How had everything fallen apart so quickly? Then I saw it. A message popped up on my screen, a notification from her social media account. She had posted something, and it wasn't just a picture of food or some casual update. It was a photo of herself, alone. She was sitting on a bench in a park, her face tilted to the side, her eyes looking away from the camera. It was an unsettling image, but it wasn't just the photo itself that unsettled me. It was the caption. Sometimes you need to lose yourself to find what's truly important. The words hit me like a punch in the gut. It felt like she was telling the world that she had already checked out. She was lost, and I was no longer part of her journey. I wanted to call her, to confront her about it, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the fear of hearing the words that would finally break me, or maybe it was the crushing realization that she had already made her decision. I couldn't help but wonder, was this really the end? Or was I simply holding on to something that had already slipped away? I tried to keep my composure, but it was becoming impossible. Each moment in the house felt like I was suffocating, like I was holding my breath, waiting for something, anything, to shift. But nothing changed. Lena remained distant, locked away in the guest room, while I kept up the routine, hoping some miracle would bring us back to where we once were. I could tell she was no longer the person I knew. She wasn't the woman who would laugh at my stupid jokes or wrap me up in her arms at the end of a long day. She wasn't my Lena anymore. A week passed in this uncomfortable silence. I felt like I was walking on eggshells, afraid to say the wrong thing or make any sudden moves. Every time I tried to talk to her, she either shut me down or gave me vague, non-committal answers. I'm just tired, she would say, or I need some time. It felt like the walls between us were growing higher and higher, and I couldn't find a way to break them down. I was starting to lose myself, too, in the waiting, in the uncertainty. I was losing sight of who I was in this broken version of us. One evening, as I sat on the couch, Scrolling through the same messages from Lena that I had read 100 times, I heard her voice. For the first time in days, she was standing in the doorway of the living room, not saying anything at first, just watching me. "Ethan," she said, her voice softer than I expected, almost like she was afraid of what she might say. I looked up, my heart racing. "Yeah?" She hesitated, looking at me for what felt like a lifetime, then took a step closer. "I don't know how much longer I can keep living like this." I swallowed hard. The words felt like ice in my veins. "Like what?" Her eyes flickered briefly to the floor, then back to me. "I don't know how to keep pretending that everything is fine when it's not. I don't feel like us anymore." There it was again, not feeling like us. The thing that had been hanging over us for days. I wanted to shout, to tell her that we could fix it, that we were worth fighting for. But the truth hit me like a slap. She wasn't looking for answers anymore. She was just looking for a way out. "I can't keep living like this either," I said before I could stop myself, the words tumbling out like they had been trapped inside for too long. "I don't know what happened, Lena. We were fine. We were happy. Or so I thought." "I know, Ethan. I thought so too. But somewhere along the way, I changed, and I don't even know who I am anymore. And I don't think I can keep doing this. With you. With us." The finality of her words hit harder than anything she'd said before. It wasn't just doubt anymore. It was a decision. A choice. The room felt colder. The space between us felt like it was miles wide. And no matter how badly I wanted to bridge that gap, I couldn't. "So what are you saying?" I asked, the question hanging in the air between us, thick with tension. She bit her lip, then exhaled, as though she was finally ready to say the thing I had been dreading. "I think I need to leave." The world seemed to stop for a moment. I stared at her, my heart racing, but my body frozen. "Leave?" I whispered. "Lena, please don't. We can fix this. We can figure this out together." But she shook her head. "I don't know if I can come back from this, Ethan. I've tried. I've tried so hard to make myself feel something again, but I'm just not sure anymore. And it's not fair to either of us to keep pretending." I felt something inside me break in that moment. It was as if every piece of hope I had clung to, every belief that things would get better, just shattered into a million pieces. She was done. She had already made up her mind, and I was just standing there, powerless to stop it. "Please, Lena," I whispered, stepping forward. "Don't go. We can fix this. We have to." But she didn't move. "I'm sorry, Ethan," she said softly. "I really am. But I think it's time for me to go. I need to find out who I am, and I can't do that here. Not with you. Not with us." I watched her turn away, her hand resting lightly on the doorknob, her back to me. I stood there for a moment, my mind spinning, my heart in 1,000 pieces. Then, with one final look, she opened the door and walked out of my life. And in that silence, I realized she had already let go. The door clicked shut behind her, and I was left standing there, paralyzed. My chest ached, as if the very air had thickened and made it impossible to breathe. I heard the soft rustle of her footsteps as she walked away, each step echoing in my ears like a countdown to something I couldn't stop. I didn't move for what felt like hours. The house was silent, and in that silence, I could hear the steady hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock on the wall, and the faint sound of the wind outside. But none of it mattered. She was gone. I finally managed to move, my legs stiff and heavy, like I was walking through molasses. I reached for the couch, the only thing in the room that felt familiar, but it didn't bring comfort. It felt like a stranger, like nothing was familiar anymore. I sat down, my mind replaying everything she had said, every word that had pierced me like a knife. "I think I need to leave," she'd said. The finality in her voice still lingered in my ears, and it felt like a weight was pressing down on my chest. It didn't make sense. We had built a life together. There was love, wasn't there? She said there had been. I thought there still was. But in that moment, I realized that she had already checked out long before she said goodbye. I grabbed my phone and stared at the screen. Her messages were still there, the ones from days before, filled with empty promises of thinking it over and needing space. I wanted to call her, to beg her to come back, but I knew deep down that I had already lost her. The woman I had once known, the woman I thought I would grow old with, was slipping through my fingers, and there was nothing I could do about it. I closed my eyes, fighting the tears that threatened to spill. I wanted to scream, to shout, but all I could do was sit there in the empty house, surrounded by silence. The walls seemed to close in on me, suffocating me with the weight of everything I had lost. Days passed, and the silence in the house felt unbearable. I spent my time cleaning, organizing, doing anything that kept my hands busy. But my mind kept returning to Lena, to the life we once had. The truth was hard to swallow. She was gone. And for the first time in my life, I had to face a future without her in it. But something began to change within me. I realized that while I couldn't change what had happened, I still had control over how I reacted. I wasn't just going to fall apart. Not for her, not for anyone. I had to move forward. It wasn't easy. There were nights when I found myself lying awake, wondering what went wrong, replaying every conversation, every moment. But each morning, I woke up with a little more clarity. I began to rediscover parts of myself I had neglected during the years of our relationship. The things I loved, writing, hiking, spending time with friends, came back into my life, slowly at first, but then more naturally. One day, I decided to take a walk through the park, something I hadn't done in months. The sun was shining, the air was crisp, and for the first time in a while, I felt a flicker of peace. As I walked, I noticed the small things, the flowers blooming, the children playing, the sound of birds in the trees, and I realized something important. Life was still beautiful, and even though Lena wasn't there beside me, I was still here. A few weeks later, I ran into an old friend, someone I hadn't seen in years. We grabbed coffee, talked about the past, about the future, and it felt good to reconnect with someone who had known me before all of this. It reminded me that I wasn't alone, even if it felt like it sometimes. And one day, as I sat in the park, looking at the world around me, I finally felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. I knew it would take time to fully heal, but I wasn't going to let my past define me. I was still capable of love, of laughter, of moving forward. And I wasn't going to give up on the possibility of finding happiness again. Life was waiting, and for the first time in a long time, I was ready to meet it head on.